Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the second episode of BhoomiTalks. Today, we have with us Falit Sijariya. He's the head of the G20 Youth Delegation. He's participated in the COP28 and is the Future Generation Global Ambassador. He is member of the Global Student Forum and the Asia representative of the Commonwealth Student Association. He is part of the UNESCO SDG 4 Youth and Student Network and is the founder and president of Studomatrix, which is a non-profit organization with over 1 million members from 150 plus cities. Today, we are your hosts Sarah and Bhavika. Hi, Falit.
How are you
Hi,
today?
Sarah. All well, all well. How are you guys doing? How's everything in the UAE?
It's
Yeah, we're
great.
good.
Great. Really
So,
glad to be part of this. And kudos to you guys for taking this great initiative and taking stuff forward.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
So happy to have you with us today.
Yes, so we'll start the interview. So, you're the head of the G20 Youth Delegation. So, what inspired you to take on this leadership role and represent the youth voices?
So essentially, my journey started way back. Till class 9th, I was studying in Delhi NCR region of India. So that's like a tier 1 area. And then in class 10th, I shifted to Meerut. That's a much smaller town in terms of opportunities, I'd say. By size, it's very similar. It has a lot of industries, great amount of population, roughly 60 to 70 kilometers away from Delhi NCR. Not that much of a different in terms of distance, but the opportunities were fairly different. So I started to work around that segment, understand the differences. Then I organized some conferences when I was in class 11. By the end of my class 12th, I started this organization, Studomatrix, with the very strong purpose that we need to get students in smaller towns and cities and even rural areas get the same opportunities that are available to anybody in the top schools in, say, a Delhi, Mumbai, or a Bangalore, right? So that educational inequality is what I was targeting upon. We were working in that segment, continue to work in that. Have been doing some great work. Through that only we applied to the Commonwealth Student Association, first for the membership for Studomatrix, then we heard about the elections. I fought them, won, and now serving as the Asia rep. And one thing led to another, and then I was appointed as the youth delegate of India for G20 for the Indonesian presidency. Then I got the opportunity to reprise my role uh, for the Indian presidency as well, where I was serving as the head of delegation and also head of the delegate affairs. And fortunately, getting the opportunity to go to Brazil as well in the same capacity. So that's broadly so in my journey of the youth representation. I think it has spun off from my own challenges or things that I have felt and an urge to try to solve for those for the wider community.
That's great because
That's
your
great.
profile is so impressive. When we were researching about you, we were like literally starstruck because you have a lot of experiences in this field, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Bhavik. I think less about being starstruck and more about how we can create opportunities for more and more people. So my journey has been more of creating opportunities for people and getting people up rather than getting individual accolades. I think Studometrics has been broadly more in that direction. The other initiatives that I'm leading are also in that direction. And I think that is what we had at the core of the Y20 philosophy as well when we were hosting it in India.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
great because doing your profile, it inspires not just us, but even others that we can do something at such a young age and we don't have to wait. Okay. So
It's a lot.
then we talked about Studomatrix. Are there any specific initiatives or projects that you're particularly proud of that you'd like to speak about?
Yeah, I think Studometrics in itself, the philosophy is something that I'm very, very proud of. So rather than being a top-down organization where somebody is sitting at the top and giving certain dictates and deciding what the organization would do, it is about creating clusters and organizing students right from the school level. So you have school units, then city level, city units, state units, and at the national level units. And a student rises from the school unit, performs there, organizes events, takes leadership, and then rises up the hierarchy to the point that they even become the national president. So for me, I started it, I served as the founder president. And recently I transitioned out of the role and now I'm the chief advisor. Whereas we have got somebody, the new president, Rishabh Gupta, he started from the school unit, St. Mary's Academy. He organized events there. Then he went to the city, state, and then national level. He took some responsibilities and finally became the national president last year. So it is about students themselves deciding what they want to organize, what are they interested in, what they want to cover, and the broader organization simply supplementing them or supporting them and providing them the cover to take initiative and deal with the authorities, get the resources, get the speakers, and all of that. But the interest and the ownership is with the students themselves, and that is how they rise. So I think that is what I'm very, very proud of. And what we have done is we have clustered it, as in whichever new initiative students want to take, they can. And we've done some stupendous work in the climate space as well. Right from the beginning, there were students who were very, very interested. And I think this is a key area that school students should ideally start working from, rather than being limited to certain segments. So we started a club called Studomatrix. While we have a lot of different clubs, we have Studo Kalakar, Studo Click, Studo Chef, etc. Studomatrix was dedicatedly focused on climate action, on what we can do, what narratives can be created, what solutions can be brought about. And the idea was to force not just focusing on advocacy. I mean, advocacy is a key part that we are doing, but also climate action at a broader level, whether it is about cleanliness drive, plantation drives, etc. And third, also on the innovation space. So how can we flex our intellectual muscle and create some solutions? So that worked in conjunction with Studo innovators on how we can find more and more innovative solutions that can be taken up to sort of deal with the problem. And I think now, I mean, this year has been an eye-opening year for a lot of folks in India, with temperatures across various cities touching 50 plus, including in Delhi. So a lot of focus, I think, would come also in that sense.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So next, you're a recipient of the Jagran Josh Student Special Award. So what do you think distinguishes your approach to student empowerment and advocacy?
I think one of the core areas is the segment that I'm working in, that is school students. You do not have a lot of people working in that space, or whether it's whenever you see any organization working with school students, it would be a group of adults who would have certain agenda that, okay, we need to transform K-12 education, we need to provide this, that, XYZ amount of exposure to students, and then take those ideas, cluster those, and then sort of teach students or try to empower them. Ours is an entirely different approach. Our idea is that students already have that in them to take the decisions, the agency. We are here only to support their initiatives. So what we are doing is we are organizing them and asking them, you decide what you want to do. We are not the ones that would decide what you are looking at. So last year I spent 1 week in Nagaland, Dimapur, Kohima. I mean, I was traveling across the country, but we decided that specifically we have to focus on the Northeast as well, because Northeast part of India, because that is generally segmented. And we took a lot of lectures, we talked to students. Those students themselves got organized. We had people from the national team sort of supporting them. This year we opened full-fledged Dimapur, Nagaland units. And those students decided, okay, now we want to say organize an event on the impact of AI. And we want to work on that. And we want to organize a debate. Can you support us with speakers? We just arranged the speakers. We spoke to, say, NIT, Dimapur, got certain speakers. Rest, everything was organized by the students. And now they are in touch with the professors as well, trying to figure out a visit. If the students can go check out what the research is going on, so that their mental muscles can also be flexed, they can understand the stuff. So it's all about facilitating the students, which is very different from what the others are doing. And now we also put it into context of the global environment. Now, Europe, almost all the countries have their national school student organizations, right? But that is not
Yeah.
present outside Europe in a very broad level. Europe also has an organizing bureau of European school student unions. So that's funded by the European Union. In fact, I'm the only, as far as I remember, the only non-European who's on the pool of trainers. So I'm responsible for training the elected leadership of all of these national school students of Europe. But outside Europe, in the global south, or even in the countries in the middle, there is no such organization that brings together school students. So we are acting more like a voice of the school students, facilitating them to speak up rather than somebody coming and speaking to them. I think that agency is something that very strongly differentiates us.
Yeah, because I think as students, we just need a small push or an encouragement from somebody, and accept that we have it in us. We can do it. So that
Exactly. I mean,
really,
you guys are, yeah, I mean, you
yeah,
guys are taking such a wonderful initiative, and it's about you speaking to people. And I see it as a two-level communication, right? that you have certain ideas, you have certain points that you want to talk about. You are the one setting the agenda and narrative, invite people, and then that is where things are going. So you decided that you want to organize BhoomiTalks, you want to focus on climate. You are the ones deciding the questions. It is not somebody from the top saying, okay, now we need to work on climate. So you guys plan out something or make the posters or figure out the questionnaire, and this is our agenda. It's not that. It's you taking the agency. I think that's the very strong differentiation. And we need people to push and support folks like you who are taking the initiative.
Yeah. So you've done a lot throughout your the last few years. Like you have a lot of responsibilities as well as experiences. How do you manage your time effectively and prioritize tasks to maximize your impact to the society?
Yeah, I think that is a very tricky question that a lot of people continue to ask me. Because one part that is not part of the introduction is that I am also a full-fledged, full-time consultant at McKinsey and Company. So if you understand the consulting job, that's also pretty hectic. Takes up around 60 to 70 hours, sometimes 80 a week as well. But I think what helps me do a lot of this work is that I focus on building institutions rather than trying to do the work myself and facilitating the folks. I think why I've been able to do is that I transfer the contacts and focus on capacity building. So if it's Studomatrix or the other organization that I'm creating right now, I'm working on creating an Indian Youth Diplomacy Forum as well. So what we do, or what I particularly do, is that we get people to take the agency and role, and then we sort of build their capacity, get contacts to them rather than say, so one approach can be that I met somebody and I feel that that is a good guy, I keep the contact to myself. And if an organization is working and then like, okay, you want to invite, you send it to me and then I'll sort of coordinate with that person, which would put in a lot of pressure. Our focus is that, okay, I met a person, now you guys think what you can do with that and I'll just transfer the contact. Now you build and then invite that guy to 10 different events. But then you build your own capacity so that maximum work you guys can do without needing me. And that is how most of the organizations that I work on sort of function. That if I have certain ideas, I transfer to them and say that this is what you can work on. You need me to connect you, I can work on that. But rest now you have to think, how do you want to ideate? How do you want to develop it on ground? How do you want to roll? So I don't get into the nitty-gritty of stuff once the things are settled. Once I have to build the institution, then I'm into each and everything and trying to ensure that there is a stable core, finding the right set of people who can work together, gel in well, and get that system in place so that then they can work like an automatic machinery and get things in place. And I can sort of help them connect and take it to a higher level and work on the broader vision of where do you want to get, where do we want to get, rather than focusing on each and every smaller aspect, and let people learn in the process and connect them with the relevant folks. And that has generally allowed me to create a broader sense of impact in most of the spaces that I've been. So whether it's Commonwealth Student Association, the broad work that I do is through the regional working group that we have created, getting folks from across Asia to take initiative, to think of ideas, build on collaboration. Whether it's Studomatrix, whether it's IYDF, even in Y20, we developed a very strong delegate affairs team. So we had got each person mapped out to 3 to 4 countries, connected them to the folks, the entire network. They were the ones directly dealing in. So I was the one who was doing the problem solving if something's escalated and they're not able to handle. But I facilitated and ensured that they built enough capacity in the first place and the system is in place that they can deliver now. And then ensuring that they get the due credit and then they rise and escalate in the hierarchy as well. So that's what we are looking at. And I think that has generally allowed me to be very, very productive and get things off the ground moving.
Yeah, I think when you're working with a team, one thing you have to understand is that you can't do everything by yourself. Like you said, transfer the work to other people and if needed, help them. So that makes you more productive overall.
Exactly. And also ensure that they get the credit and they feel a sense of ownership. And not just a superficial sense of ownership, they actually have a sense of ownership as well. I mean, for everybody in Studomatrix, it was a very strong message that, okay, somebody who just joined the organization, rose up right from the school unit level, can lead an organization this big. And it is not related to or owned by a specific individual or a group of people, which generally happens with a lot of organization. And that is where the mutual respect or the foundation or the culture of the organizations also come in. And I think this is what I've learned or able to develop over a period of time, which I'm generally very proud of. which also helps us create massive impact in most spaces.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, as a global ambassador for future generations, what are some key initiatives or goals that you're currently working on?
I think one of the key areas when you look at from the future generations perspective, I think two themes that I am very connected to. One obviously is the climate space, and second is about the future of work. When you look at AI and I mean a lot of different things coming in, right? So I'll speak about both a bit. I'll speak about the future of work first. When you look at the broad level of trends, how things are moving, I mean, obviously there are a lot of articles, a lot of folks talking about how AI would influence this, that, XYZ, right? And obviously we understand that there'd be a lot of reskilling that is required. A lot of jobs will go out, and similarly, a lot more jobs would be created as humans become productive. But a similarly important trend is of demographic transitions that is happening. Countries in Europe are basically facing a lot of aging population. Same is with Eastern Asia as well. You look at Japan, you look at South Korea. They're facing broad levels of problem. But while Europe is slightly more assimilative, has been historically getting a lot more migration. Countries in East Asia have not been that assimilative for that matter. They have a homogeneous culture, if you realize. Same problem you would face in Canada, a lot of other Western world. That and then this is now headlining their key areas. I mean, if you look at the UK, now they are forced to bring in that mandatory law for people to serve in the army for a year or something like that, right? So mandatory conscription. Sweden already has that. The NHS is facing severe problems. You have shortage of drivers, plumbers, a lot of these jobs. So I think working at that is one key area. How do we problem solve for that? And I think what we are working for is the accreditation of skills, right? Because these are the areas which would need a lot more transition and ensuring that there are smoother pathways. And this also resonates from where we come from in India, that we need to create more opportunities for our people to get jobs and build on them, and at the same time, more innovation as well. So ensuring that sort of happens. On the climate space, I focus on the global south perspective and ensuring that the narrative is in a positive sense. Generally, when you look at the climate narrative or the figures that are around, you would see figures around uh, emissions for that matter, which are being created in whichever countries. There is very little discussion about one per capita emissions, which generally does not headline. Which if you say, for example, compare a Sweden or a Switzerland's emissions to India, you would definitely have a difference. Second would be who is the consumer. So for example, India might be producing a lot of steel, which are one of the key steel producers, but who is actually consuming it, right? Which brings us to the question of lifestyle. In fact, India also brought out the mission Lifestyle for Environment, where you need to figure out what is the per capita consumption you're doing for plastic, per capita emissions of carbon, per capita emissions of XYZ stuff, right? The number of flights you are taking for even short distances. So these are the questions and the narratives that we need to shift. Second, no matter how much we talk about climate change and climate action, the question that would also come is, what is the developed world doing to ensure that their commitments to climate finance are taking place? How much climate finance are they generally transferring to the global south? Because the global south also has the responsibility of bringing its people out of poverty, for also ensuring energy security to our people, to areas where there still might not be 24/7 electricity. We need to provide that as well to our people, right? And if we, for example, have coal, we need to work on utilize that as well while simultaneously increasing our solar capacity that we obviously are doing. Or for example, wind, thermal, nuclear, and a lot of that stuff. If we need technology transfers, it cannot so happen that the West that has generally benefited from, if I were to put it very bluntly, utilizing our resources or exploiting them and building and bringing their people out of poverty out of that and developing their technology that way. In fact, a lot of human resources also ours, to be honest, that is traveling and building those technologies. And now simply say that, okay, we cannot transfer that. For that, now you need to pay. So we also have to pay for those technologies and then adopt it, while simultaneously saying, okay, we have coal and we would not use it because climate goals that we are committing to. So that becomes slightly difficult. So that balance is necessary, and that is what we need to bring about, that there are countries who need to specifically take up more responsibility It cannot so function that your president say that climate change is a hoax, or pull out from UNFCCC, which some of the key countries have in fact done in the past. Then, I mean, regime changes and coming back to it. So it cannot function that way. You have to understand the problem, but you also need to understand who has played how much of a role in creating that problem, and the narratives and outlooks that we have to look at. You cannot function that in the West you would have more and more startups and wealth created based on extreme amount of resource consumption. Say a company is building on fast fashion, say you buy a shirt and then you wear it for 2 or 3 times and then you discard. And all of this stuff can happen in one part of the world, and then that part of the world can blame the others for even providing electricity 24/7 to their folks, right? So that narrative has to change, and that is what we are very strongly working on to getting a solution, because this is where the big chunk of problem essentially lies in.
Yeah, you were talking about unemployment, yeah. So I just wanted to know, how is the situation in India right now? Because right now it's really hard to get jobs and all, I've been hearing. So what is the situation?
I think a lot of information that you hear is also about what is being presented. I mean, elections are and unemployment is a very touchy topic. If you very recently open the news, it talks about OpenAI releasing certain reports about companies trying to manufacture agenda and some of that stuff. So that keeps on happening. But if you look at the real picture on ground, India is going through a massive growth phase. You have got around 8.2% GDP growth in the last fiscal year, which is extremely spectacular. And we are moving at a 7% growth rate. So the growth rate is good. What generally comes to question then is people say that it's a growth without creating employment. So employment-less growth, which can be a problem. But then you have to look at that there are changes in the employment patterns happening. Right. So the gig working is a segment which is very strongly coming up. You have people who are working as drivers or delivery folks in Zomato, in Swiggy, in Zepto, and some of the key startups that are sort of coming in. At the same time, there are a lot of people who are moving to the VC space as well. They're creating their own startups. Opportunities are being created in those. So it's not that it is really difficult. It is much better than earlier, but the types of jobs that were being created is different. Now the aspirations of people are getting different. And I think once the elections are clear, you would see, I mean, in the past few year, 1 year or so, there was some uncertainty in the investments from the PE and the VC firms, particularly because of what direction the election would take. Now that there would be stability post 4th of Jan, I think there are a lot of outlets and the discussion that I've come up with that a lot more investment is going to come in, and you'd see a much better sort of implementation in that phase. So it's not that bad as you can say in the employment space. Past few months have been slightly difficult. COVID obviously took a very strong toll, but now it's more about creating your own job opportunities. The aspiration of the Indian youth is more in the direction of creating their own startups, having their own ventures. You can see, I mean, shows like Shark Tank, and you'd see the tremendous amount of innovation that is happening in both the consumer space, the B2B space, the D2C space. So a lot of people are doing a lot of stuff, which is creating opportunities. So you nearly not just see from an employment standpoint of getting a job, but getting exposure and starting something of your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we come to the end of our talk, I would like to ask, what advice would you give young people aspiring to make a difference in the community, like on a global level?
I think my advice broadly would first be network. I mean, network around as much as you can, talk to folks, understand diverse perspective. Do not enter any conversation with a strong viewpoint, or be ready to fill your bottle, because a lot of times you might not have that much of an information, or you might have read something. But in today's day and age, there's a lot of information warfare going around every now and then. So you need to figure out who is writing what, from what perspective, which might not be that easy at this point of time, because you cannot always check, okay, this news outlet, who is the source, who is the funder, who is the router, who is the background, etc. But do not hold strong opinions. In most cases, try to understand the perspective. And more importantly, when you're trying to build change, try to build it together. Find allies who you can build support with. Choose your causes wisely, what you're focusing your energy on. a lot of times what you're seeing is people are focusing their energy across board on each and every single thing without being able to bring any single thing to fruition. So we need to build that ally network amongst ourselves, people who are dedicated to similar causes across countries, and then look at how we can basically create advocacy, how we can create narrative, and more importantly, understand what works in what countries. In some countries, it might be talking to bureaucratic figures, directly building rapport with them and trying to make them understand, giving in-room presentations might be much more effective, for example, to work for climate, right? For similar other countries, what might be beneficial is the climate strikes and all the protests and all that stuff. But that depends on the nature of the country. What is happening is a lot of youth activists getting inspired by each other are thinking that a similar one-size-fits-all approach would fit in their country as well. That might not happen. I mean, the reality of the world is that there are different governance systems. If you look at Myanmar, there's like a military junta right now ruling. If you look at some of the countries in Africa have same parties for past 20, 30 years, you need to figure out who are the power centers. You need to, I'm not saying that they're necessarily wrong or anything, but you need to figure out who's the power center. What is it that necessarily sort of works with them? Identify what causes to pick, what to choose, and what to prioritize at certain points of time, and then work in those segments, finding the right allies. So I think we need to look at diversifying our approaches and identifying the key stakeholders. And more broadly, what I would also say is that youth should not fall into the trap where they feel that, okay, corporates are evil, which I mean, most cases, corporates do follow a profit-minded agenda. But if youth in the advocacy space does not really relate to or understand the corporate space and build those ties, they would not be able to have as much impact as they want to. I can tell you that for sure. Because a lot of things moves on where the money is flowing, where the venture capitals, for example, putting their money in. I know a lot of VC funds have come up, which are singularly focused on investing in, say, green energy. So these types of stuff are coming up. So youth needs to basically promote this type of shifts and trends. I can say for sure, no government, very difficult for any government, or there'd be rarely very few governments who would not listen to the economic prioritization, because that determines how much investment is coming into the country, how much money people are getting into their pockets, how many jobs are created, how happy are the people. That would determine whether you will get elected in the next election or not for the democratic countries, or for the different other types of forms of government are there to ensure that their people are happy and there is stability and there is no unrest. You would want people to be happy, and that would more or less broadly be based on how much money is coming in. So countries are not going to ignore it in the near future. It is up to us to ensure that the financial flows happen in the right direction, add those caveats, and work in a direction. I mean, I can say a very good example is how World Bank sort of says that, okay, we are giving loan, but you would prefer to give loans to companies who are better at the ESG norms for that matter, right? So getting into these spaces, making allies with your friends in these spaces who are having a sense of influence, and then saying, okay, let's frame these policies, let's build allies in that direction, and ensuring that the flow of money happens in a direction that we sort of wanted. So that very smart outlook has to happen rather than merely shouting in companies and say, okay, this etc. cannot happen. I remember, I mean, for the UAE presidency, a lot of folks were criticizing. Again, not a comment or anything on that. That is a strong point to say that, okay, that's a perspective. But then I think we also need to ensure that we ensure the flows of this money is going in the right direction, and they also temper it with the climate sense.
Yeah. So thank you, Falit. That was the last question. It was great having a conversation with you.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
we learned a lot today. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot,
So,
Sarah.
so we've come to the end of the episode. We're so glad to have you today with us. We'll see you guys next time on the next Bhoomi Talks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.